the first book of Samuel, session 61. And today we begin with chapter 26. And as we read chapter 26, I'm just wondering, David just took Abigail to be his wife. Where did he take her to? Because, he doesn't have a house, he doesn't have a home. How does it work? Because he's still running around in the wilderness, in verse 1. And the Ziphites came unto Saul to Gibeah and said, Does not David hide himself in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Yeshimon? So are these women running with Joseph? Are they side by side with him? Are they sharing in his persecution and in his endurance in the wilderness and all his experiences? Or did they all go home and are they waiting for him to be crowned king? And then what? Will the marriages then be consummated? I don't know. I'm just wondering about these logistical arrangements in the desert. But anyway, so it's quite interesting again, the Ziphites. We saw how Father Yhwh brought David into the wilderness of Ziph, and that is the wilderness of refinement, where you are being made liquid like a gold that is heated up so that the impurities can be pressed out of you and you can become pure and useful in his hand, and you can understand his ways and you can understand him better and his kingdom better, because you have gone through the wilderness of refinement, of being smelted or melted down. And when you have a physical meltdown before him, then he can build you up like the tabernacle ornaments and tools and instruments. The gold had to be melted down and all the impurities had to be removed. And then that gold could be formed into tools that is to be used in his tabernacle. And those tools were called holy because they were set apart. Once they were formed in the hand of a skilled workman, they were holy, separated, set apart for a specific use only, and not to be used for mixed use. And this is also the heiligmakingsproses, the process of becoming holy for God's people, even as we run through the wilderness of Ziph. But as we come into Ziph, and we know that this is our refinement period, this is where we have to be melted down, then even that, the question is, where can we hide? Where can we be totally, at peace, even if it does mean a bit of dying to ourselves and spending time with God in Ziph and Ma'on, in those two wildernesses, in the dwelling place and the refinement. But even there, the Ziphites come and they tell Saul, listen, we know exactly where David is. He is here and there. And they gave him the two names. And we'll see how significant these two names are as well. David hides in Hachilah, which is before Yeshimon. But these are the Ziphites. These are the area where you have been refined. Sometimes Ziphites are used to refine you. The people in the refinement process, the people around you. Many times your closest people are the Ziphites that God actually uses to rub against you, to disappoint you, to hurt you, even to betray you. And that is also part of the, liquefaction process of making your hard heart soft, making the hard, impure gold into liquid so that it can be used for a holy object. So David is hiding. Saul, do you want to know where he is? We will tell you exactly where he is. He is in Hachilah. Hachilah means darkness. The root word is chakliel, and that has the meaning of dark or very red, as simulated by wine, a dark red. So David is hiding in the darkness, and that is before Yeshimon. And Yeshimon means desolation. It is a desert in the area Yeshimon, and the root word has the meaning of solitary, alone, lonely, wastefulness, desolation. So David is hiding in the darkness of desolation. And as we go through the Ziphite process of being refined, how many times do we also find ourselves in darkness and desolation, in the wilderness of darkness and desolation? And this is where the enemy will come to find us. And if this is not where we are going to be clinging onto the kanaf or the borders of the garment of Yeshua, if we're not going to be clinging to our God like Yaakov did at the Jabbok River, if we're not going to be clinging to the corners of the altar, crying, repenting, coming into the tabernacle, clinging onto the wash basin, washing ourselves, clinging onto the showbread table, the menorah, and the veil, shedding our tears on the altar of incense, then the darkness and the wilderness of desolation will really get to us. It will get us to that point where the enemy can use our being at our lowest to crush us and to steal us and to snatch us away and to kill us like Saul wanted to kill David, to kill us so that we are not doing our part in his kingdom as he intended when he melted Ziph, melted down the gold to form a specific tool for use in his tabernacle. Satan doesn't want you to be formed by the hands of the maker into a tool that he can use in his kingdom, a tool that will have eternal value, a tool that might not have much in this world. David didn't have much at that moment, but he had his God with him. And we might not have much, but we have our God. And if we are not going to know him, yada him, and have da'at, knowledge of him, and believe him like Abraham did, not only believe in him, but believe all his prophecies and all the reasons he has that he has given us. If we are not going to believe that while we are melted down like gold, and as we are facing the valley of the shadow of death and darkness and desolation in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Yeshimon, like our beloved David, then we will fall prey to the enemy that is coming with 3,000 men. Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. Then he's going to find David. If David is going to lose his focus, like Peter did, when Peter arrogantly said, let me walk in the wilderness of Ziph. Let me come out onto the waters of the sea. Let me walk with you on the water. Arrogantly, we think we can handle the wilderness of Ziph. I thought I could. I invited it because I knew this was the process in which the bride will be chosen. And I so much wanted to be bride. So I said, it's fine, let me go through the wilderness. Let me go through the fire of the refiner. Let me sit in the refiner's fire of Malachi. I want to be your bride. And I expected the wilderness of Ziph to be, difficult. And I expected a certain way for it to go. But I didn't expect what actually happened. And for 2 years, I was living in absolute hell. I was in Hachilah, in Yeshimon. 2 years of utter darkness and desolation and fear and loneliness. But you know what? I will not replace that 2 years of the valley of shadow of death, that 2 years in the wilderness of Ziph, that crushed my hard heart, my arrogant heart, like Peter, who took it lightly that he can do it. And the moment he took his eyes off Yeshua, he fell into the water and was about to drown. If David took his eyes off Yahuwah for 1 second, Saul would have found him. If I took my eyes, and I did in that 2 years many times, and God had to keep on increasing the fire, the heat. He had to continuously increase it. And I wanted to die. And eventually I realized I'm not alone. For Him to increase the refiner's fire, He is right there checking the quality of the gold, seeing if the fire is hot enough to bubble up the impurities, continuously adjusting the heat, continuously scooping off the disgusting filth that is melting out of the gold. Because the gold has been mined out of the earth deep, deep down. And there's still a lot of debris and, dirty things inside the gold. And it took 2 years. Yes, it did. And it almost caused me to, at the end of the 2 years, to give up. I've given up quite a few times in between, but that was not the ultimate. And when he took me through that process, that I will not wish I never had, when I was in the wilderness of Ziph, I wish I could get out. I wanted to get out every day. David wanted to get out every day. But if David looks back upon his wilderness journey, he realized he learned to get to know his God like he was never going to be able to get to know Him in Jerusalem. Or even in the field when he was a little shepherd boy, trusting God and singing praises to Him and loving Him and looking after the sheep and chasing away the lion and the wolf and the bear. This was a different way. This is the deepest way in which to get to know this God. You get to know Him when you are a shepherd, yes. You get to know Him when you are in Jerusalem. But you only really get to know Him and trust Him and believe Him and love Him when He takes you through the wilderness of Ziph. And it's here in Hachilah, in the darkness of Yeshimon, desolation and loneliness. It is only here where you come face to face with your biggest enemy. Saul, the biggest enemy of David, wasn't his biggest enemy. My biggest enemy wasn't that which the Ziphites that God used to purify me. My biggest enemy was me. And David's biggest enemy was him. And your biggest enemy is you. And sometimes, the Bible says, don't disregard the day of small beginnings. Don't disregard the days where you start to learn to die to this self. A couple of sessions ago, we did talk about the biggest enemy of our souls not being Satan, not the New World Order, not the people that will persecute us, but ourselves. The inner God, the self of your belly, inside your belly, your desire, your nature, your will, your emotions, your rights, your feelings mustn't be hurt. That self whose feelings are hurt, that is the biggest enemy. And that was the self-pity, self-bejammering was the biggest Ziphite that I had to go through. And if you look at David could have gone into a little bit of depression and self-pity all the time. He didn't deserve what was happening to him. Neither do we feel that we deserve what's happening to us. And sometimes we don't. It's not about deserving or why are people doing this to me? It's so unfair. Oh God, why are you allowing all this to happen? We are just stupid little ants in an anthill. We cannot see the bigger things that God is busy with, because if we could, we would run to this wilderness of Ziph. God says in the book of Hosea, I will lure you into the wilderness, and there I will speak romantic, beautiful, encouraging, lovely words with you trying to entice you to come back to me, trying to entice you to teach you who I am and how much I love you and what you mean to me, even as you are being refined, even as you are sitting in desolation and darkness and loneliness. Whatever your situation is, don't despise the day of small beginnings. Every opportunity to die to the self makes the time in Ziph so much more effective. Because if the gold wants to jump out of the refiner's fire before it is ready, then the impurities inside that gold, even though the tool is then formed, that tool will not last. That tool will not be able to endure, because the impurities makes it weak and makes it less valuable in the hand of the priest that uses it in the tabernacle. So don't despise your time in the wilderness of Ziph, and know that you are going between Ziph and Maon all the time. And then you're going to find yourself in Halicha, Hachila, and Yeshimon now and again. And try to see this from God's perspective, from the one who sits next to the refiner's fire, the refiner himself. Try to look at your wilderness experience, David's wilderness experience, God's people's wilderness experience in the end. Try to look at this from the refiner's perspective, from his point of view. Where he sits, he is burnt quite a lot. He's not sitting somewhere sunbathing, drinking a Coca-Cola, enjoying the afternoon. He's sitting right next to the fire. He's feeling the heat. He's looking into the gold or the silver that he is busy refining. He is watching it intently, never taking his eye off it. Because if the heat becomes too much, then he can lose that gold or that silver. And after 2 years, he almost lost me. He looked at me, he watched me, and he saw I couldn't. He saw I couldn't anymore. I've learned what I had to learn, and I couldn't anymore. And he brought me out. And how did he bring me out? How much did he bring me out of my darkness, my desolation, and my fire, and the trial that I was going through? And then there was a period of healing, and I'm telling you, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for David's Ziph journey, and if it wasn't for my Ziph journey, David wouldn't have been able to write the Psalms he did, and I wouldn't have been able to do the Bible studies I'm doing. There's just no ways. He had to burn the self out of me, and he had to burn the self out of David. Because why? Now we get to know our God. Because in the next verse we see, Saul pitched a tent in Hachila, which is before Yeshimon, by the way. But David abode in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him in the wilderness. For people who are willing to let God take them through the wilderness of Ziph, even landing in Yeshimon and Hachila. For those people, God opens his own thoughts, his own mind. He opens his words. He opens the prophetic picture of everything that he has written down from the beginning of ancient times, so that we can also see, like David saw, Saul was following him. God made David see. God opened David's eyes. David was always one step before the enemy, because he learned to overcome the enemy in the wilderness of Ziph. And if we can overcome our biggest enemy, ourselves, our nature, our will, our feelings, our rights we have, and I'm talking about your rights and your feelings and poor me, in your marriage, in your family, in your workplace, and in this world one day under persecution. Even now, your right to feel depressed, or your right to feel hurt or offended, That is your right. And if you want to sit in the pigsty and feel sorry for yourself the rest of your life, then it's fine. Then you can do it. But there's going to be a time that you need to go through that wilderness journey and come home to God so He can wash you clean and take you into His house again. If you're not going to be willing to be tested, Yeshua said to Peter, Satan demanded to test you, but I have prayed for you. Our biggest victory is when we overcome ourself, the enemy of self in the wilderness of Ziph, finding God in Hachilah and Yeshimon, losing ourselves in Hachilah and Yeshimon, and then having God opened our eyes. Like Satan opened our eyes when we were disobedient and we thought, no, God is not going to care. And then Satan turned the hearts of humanity against God and we started blaming Him for everything. You can even now blame Him for your wilderness of Ziph experience. David could have blamed God. God, why did you, hello, you made me king. Hello, down here on earth. Why am I not king? Why am I running for my life? No. I think God made David see. And that is why if you take the Psalms like I learned to do, and you break them apart like a piece of bread, and you shout them and cry them and scream them out to Father, you start learning to know the deeper meaning of your own journey. I promise you God will reveal what He's busy with in your life. He might even take you back, as far back as He wants to take you, to go and see where yourself became your God, to try and get rid of that, so that He can break you down to the smallest parts. That's why the Bible says, if we fall on the rock, on the cornerstone, we will be broken. But if the cornerstone falls on you, it will crush you. You have to learn to be broken up in small pieces, falling upon Him, allowing the wilderness of Ziph journey. Whatever your specific situation is, even if it's only a small situation that you are trying to overcome, try to use these instructions I'm giving you, these guidelines, this training that we are going through with David. Try to use this in every situation. Get to learn God's perspective in this bad situation of yours. Start practicing your tabernacle journey, your Ziph and Ma'on journey. Practice the repentance. Be honest. Allow God to show you, like David says, when I'm lying on my bed, what is the word? Search me, search my heart, search my kidneys, show me my heart, and be willing to look at it. Be willing for God to show you what really goes on in your heart as you struggle with, husband, child, sickness, illness, finance, whatever. Be honest, be willing to have a look at your own deep, darkest Hachilah, your deepest, darkest desolation, your loneliness inside of you. Have a deep, dark look at that. Let Yahuwah burn it. Let it bubble up in the refiner's fire. Let it come to the surface. Let Him show you what your emotions and your feelings about yourself and your rights and your desolation and the darkness you find yourself in. Let Him show you what your real intentions are. And sometimes you have to go through a process of elimination. And you have to lay down all the excuses and explanations and rebuttals and arguments you might have. Do it. Go through that process with God on your knees. If I learned that knowledge sooner, it might not have taken 2 years. So I'm trying to teach you so that your journey will be quicker and you can get refined quicker. You have to be honest with yourself. You're going to have to be willing to let that self and those feelings and those rights that you think you have be bubbled up to the surface. And when my rights and my feelings and my offense, when I allowed it to be bubbled up and God showed to me what it is, I then repented of all of those with real repentance, seeing the evil that I'm using as an excuse for my self-pity. And then he showed me, then he was able, once you are willing to be honest and have your eyes open to the enemy that is really persecuting you. Once I was willing to look at that, admit it, repent it, he could take me deeper and show me the roots of those, whatever it was, self-pity, because of the Ziphites, because of what the Ziphites are doing, because of the refinement, because of the heat of the fire. Of course you're going to have self-pity when you go through these processes. But if you are willing to put the self-pity on the altar and burn it up, and Father can show you where it comes from, what is the root of it? Sometimes one becomes really surprised to see how the prideful nature of Lucifer is rooted deep, deep down in the self inside of us. And that is what God is trying to reach. That is why we have to go through Ziph and Maon and Hachila and Yeshimon. He has to bring that pride of Lucifer out to the surface so that he can watch when it comes and he can scoop it off, and you can be finally clean and pure and ready to be used in this end-day persecution of his bride. And once you yourself has gone through that process, only then can you understand this bigger picture. Like the little ant that's going through the wilderness of Ziph, he only sees his own experience and he only feels sorry for himself because he's only looking at what's happening to him, what's happening to me. But once you go through that and you are willing to be exposed and you are willing to have God search your heart and your kidneys and everything, then you start understanding, because he's opening your eyes. Like David saw Saul was coming after him. God made David see. Although he was in darkness and desolation, God gave him more than just eyes. You know, Satan opened our eyes in the Garden of Eden, but that was only to see our nakedness. All his promises, all your self-promises, all the good things that you think you are busy with, those are all false promises. False promises of opening our eyes. God will open your eyes of understanding the bigger picture, the great kingdom, the plan of this God, his thoughts that are so much higher than ours. And then when you read Daniel 11:33, they that understand, the people that know their God, verse 32, shall be strong. You only get to know him. You really yada and trust and believe, imuna him in the wilderness of Ziph and Maon. And then you learn to understand in Hachila and Yeshimon. They that know their God will be strong, and they will do great things. They that understand will instruct many. Yet they will fall by the sword, by flame, captivity, and by spoil for many days. And some of them, verse 35, some of them of understanding will fall. Yes, in the wilderness of Ziph, we have to fall. But the wilderness of Ziph, Daniel 11:35, is to try you, to test you, to purge you, and to make you white. The bride can only be lured into the wilderness And if she's willing to go through Ziph, to go through that becoming liquid, the hardness being heated and melted, so that she can become pure white gold. Then 11:35, Daniel 11:35, then you understand. And you even understand that your falling is the testing and the purging and the making white process. And Daniel says, this will happen even to the time of the end. This is only for a time that is yet appointed. It hasn't happened yet. And of course, Daniel and many other people has gone through this very same process. But this process where the end time bride as a church will also go through this wilderness of Ziph and Hachilah and Yeshimon, while the enemy is biting at your heels all the time. That's going to happen only at the time yet appointed, the time of the end. And that's why you must now practice. Every opportunity, difficulties in your marriage, practice. Let Ziph burn you. Let the fire refine you. Learn to die to yourself. Learn to offer it on the sacrifice altar. Learn to get to know the will of God as you burn on the altar. Let Him lift you up. Let Him restore you. When you die to yourself in front of Ziphites, people that betrayed you, God will restore you. And if He doesn't do it now, you just wait. You know that He is the one that says, revenge belongs to me. He will be our judge. He will avenge us, like David believed as well. And God did how many times? How are we learning from David's journey? It's a deep, emotional, personal journey for each and every single one of us. But it's also our collective journey as the end day saints that has to be purged and made white so that we can do great things in His kingdom. David's name was known through all the ages for the great things he's done. But his greatest accomplishment that David is known for is the Psalms he's written. And I promise you, when you are sitting in Hachilah, when you are walking around in Yeshimon, read the Psalms, word for word, as if it is your own words, and see how the things that David was feeling is echoed inside of you. And because David was God's man after his heart, David means beloved. You can bring those same words before God, use the same prayers, go through the same David experience. God will take you through just like He did with David.